Finding Certainty, with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Lang. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Lang.
Welcome back, everybody, to Finding Certainty. We are honored today to have a very special guest, Mr. Gary Reeves. Has a long list of accolades to his career. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with him and talking about his background and his contributions. I know these type of interviews and experiences, Gary, are not always comfortable for you because you're not one to talk about yourself. And yet it's par for the course, of course, to introduce you and tell your story a little bit. But really appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we are blessed to have Gary with us because not only has he accomplished a significant amount in his career, but the thing that he is most proud of is the service and the social impact that he's been able to be a part of. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. In fact, the title of today's show is how love and kindness can impact our business and our lives. I think maybe we take that for granted, but it's a topic that definitely deserves attention. We're going to break that down a little bit, talk about some examples, and both from Gary's life. I'll share a couple of my own examples, but we're very excited to have you here, Gary. I always start out the show by sharing just a couple of reasons why I've selected this week's guest. And first and foremost, Gary was introduced to me by Frank Hellring, who was the host of Business Buzz. And he said, Patrick, you and Gary will resonate with each other because you both have a servant's heart. That's probably the first reason I asked Gary to come on, because it's absolutely true. We're new friends, we're new acquaintances, so I'm just starting to really understand what that means in Gary Reeves. I've always tried to give back and always tried to make a difference throughout my life. I've had some extraordinary mentors. And so when I meet somebody like you, Gary, that embodies that throughout your career and throughout your life, that really resonates with me. The second side of that is, or second reason why I wanted to invite Gary on our show is that not only is he serving others and he's had a significant impact from a social impact standpoint in a number of different ways, which we'll go into a little bit, but he has this unique ability of putting together parties and groups that maybe you wouldn't have considered, groups that have differences, groups that that come from different backgrounds and different walks of life and so forth, and helping them collaborate and come together. I'm going to ask you for an example or two of that, Gary, but I think that's a really essential part. It's really a key part of finding certainty. As I started to tell you, Gary, just before the show, when I was asked to start the show, Finding Certainty, I was a guest on Frank Hellring's show. He invited me to meet with Robert Cellino, who's the senior executive producer, the general manager for Voice America. And the first question he asked me was, what do you want to do your show about? What would two pillars be about the show? And the first, as we've discussed in the past here, anyone who's listening, the first is that businesses and nonprofits, they have to evolve. They have to be willing to explore new relationships and new technologies and new opportunities, possibilities, mindsets, et cetera, et cetera. The second is that I believe we have to work together to accomplish what we want to accomplish. There are significant things we can do, but we'll never do as much as we could if we don't do it together. And there's this problem in America that it's very divided, and we're focused more on our differences than on our similarities. And yet, if you look at it, we really do have a great deal in common. As you and I were discussing just briefly, Gary, that we may vote differently, we may come from different backgrounds, go to different churches, etc. But we have so much in common. We care about our kids' safety. We care about nonprofits succeeding. We care about business being strong, et cetera, et cetera. And so anyway, with that framework, that's the second reason I asked Gary to be on our show today, because he is a fantastic example of that, of bringing groups together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. So Gary, you've been a music icon. I mean, you helped find En Vogue, which is one of the most extraordinary female groups of all time. You've been in entertainment, with working with everyone from Michael Jordan on his Michael Jordan's Playground video, which is the #1 selling video of all time on NBA Entertainment. You went from there and have worked with Magic Johnson, with I mean, the list goes on and on. Jamie Foxx, and you've worked with these celebrity performers and top names in the industry. And yet, if I know you, and anyone who knows you will say, those are not your top accomplishments in your mind.
Right.
The things you are most proud of are the ways in which you've given back and the ways you've helped others to do more. You have the Emmy award-winning TV series Give, which was on NBC originally, correct? And now it's on Oprah Winfrey Network.
Yeah.
And so, is that a safe statement that those are the types of experiences and contributions that you, if you're proud of anything, those are the things you're most proud of? Is that a safe statement?
Yeah, as we were speaking kind of off camera earlier, a lot of those opportunities really showed up through my passion for people. And, I've always been just a curious kid. When I was young, I always kind of was one of those people that kind of investigated, kind of what's the origin of how this manifested, right? And so, from world leaders to social issues and concerns to kind of the beat that people move by in life, it's I was just always, from a very young age, like 14 years old, just my pastime outside of loving basketball, and I did basketball, bowling, and baseball early in my life, and in martial arts, but my real passion was just I was just intrigued by like world leaders, and then what was the silver lining between what was biblical and what was practical, so I mean, from Ernest Hemingway to Henry Kissinger to JFK to Martin Luther King to Gandhi, Benjamin E. Mays, who spoke and taught King, and Jesse Jackson, who was at Morehouse, which a lot of people don't. I think he needs to be celebrated more. But just kind of, what's the silver lining between all these different leaders? And it still just landed on, being kind, being loving, and pushing that. How do we push that forward so more people can embrace it, right? To have a more just society, have more equality and respectability for women leadership, and the inclusion of diversity, where like I'm just a big person around. It's not about color; it's about character, right? And
right.
Some people are not going to. I know there's people that don't agree with me because I'm African American around that statement. But how do you not agree? And I have, kind debates, around, because the argument, for people that have, say, struggled, right, where we felt like, hey, the playing field wasn't equal. I say it wasn't equal, not be more on the surface, it may be race related, but the people that were making the decisions, it was really about character. Right. So if they were just, or if they believed in equality or acknowledging people's contribution based on body of work, to me, it's still a character call.
Absolutely.
Although their motivation might have been about race. I mean, I recently, unfortunately, went and had a racial incident. I mean, I was fine, but in a coffee shop that I frequented for 15 years. And, you know, I had everyone that stood up for me was non-African American. Right. And I realized the guy was mental, and, you know, he called out a race card, and I didn't know he was speaking to me. And then I realized he was speaking to me, and I didn't say anything, didn't respond. And everyone else in the coffee shop responded. And they asked me, was I okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, one, I realized the man has a mental issue. Two, I don't look at life that way. I feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
But I didn't take it any kind of way, him calling me what he called me, and my life goes on, you know. But, you know, I didn't need to be reactionary. Right. Because one, I assessed he has an issue. Two, culturally, I call people like that culturally deprived, right? Where they just don't have life experiences to see the equality, the silver lining is, you know, more about humanity than it is about race. Fairness is really about character than it is about measuring opportunities because of, or having the inclusion because of color.
I couldn't agree more. I was fortunate to grow up in a family that was diverse. We had my brother's adopted from Samoa, as I was telling you. My sister is adopted from Korea.
Yeah.
He's married to a gorgeous Black man named David. And so our family picture looks like the United Nations,
right?
Colors of Benetton. And I love that. It gave me a unique perspective. And I heard you on an interview recently where you talked about how if someone was raised in a different family, they'd have a completely different outlook.
Right.
And I completely agree with that. Right. We aren't born racist.
Right.
We aren't born with specific character. We might have specific personalities and specific talents that we come into this world with, but it's really drilled into us. Right.
Yeah.
I remember a movie called Best of Enemies, and it was about this Ku Klux Klan leader and this Black matriarch in this community who are forced to work together on this service project. It was something, I think it was even a punishment because it caused a problem.
I heard about this. Yeah.
Amazing movie. Yeah. And you watch him transform and come to love this woman, and it was the last thing he thought was going to happen, right? And I highly recommend it. But it shows that not only is it something that can be taught from a young age, which definitely drilled into us, but it is something we can learn too, even when we're older.
Yeah,
if we try, right?
Yeah. I mean, I understand, life circumstances are complicated, and depending, again, how we were raised and what we were exposed to, we all respond to those circumstances differently. But as I was sharing with you earlier, one, I always say our imperfections allows God to show up. I'm more spiritual than I'm religious, but we're not perfect, right? No. And we can learn from those lessons when our imperfections show up, right? And so I think that's really our driver in life, is we all want to do better for the most part. But more importantly, on this racial divide is, as I was sharing with you, I always look at, the we in me, right? And I'm very comfortable with the we in me, which is when I encounter someone at that point, they're carrying a part of me. As I exchange with them, I'm learning more about myself. They're learning more about themselves. So it's, if we can move with kind of this intention of the we in me, right? Instead of he and her and him, all the different narratives around separation. But if you look at history, if you look at where we are today, if people really look at who they are today, they're a collective, right? Of one, the origin and the uniqueness that they came into the world, but then now they're a sponge after that, right? And they have influences and influencers and mentors and mentees and things of that nature and experiences. And so then you don't even know the butterfly effect of how you become who you've become, right? So that's why I say, if we practice the we in me, then there's more empathy, natural, just organic, natural empathy for people. And there's no strangers. Like I don't look at, like I'm not looking at strangers, but that's just how I'm dialed up. You know, I'm not, when I walk in a room, I'm not saying, oh, I'm the only African American person in the room. I don't see the room that way. That's a reality, but I don't look at the room that way.
Right.
Basically. And I think that contributes to a lot of, you know, kind of unfortunately, the challenges that we're having today, or, you know, whether you're Republican or Democrat. I always say it's about the truth. I'm neither one. I'm about who is pushing forward the truth, period.
That's how I feel. Exactly. I loved your comment. I heard where you said, I never walk into a room a stranger because everyone is me, right? We have so much common ground. We have, I mean, we're all brothers and sisters, right? If you want to get religious or get spiritual about it. I love the song from Mandisa about we all bleed the same blood, the same color red. And, you know, you talked about how you're not reactionary, even with this gentleman who was in the coffee shop. I heard once years ago as a child that there's this space between some sort of impulse and a response, right?
Right.
The longer that space is, usually the better the response.
Right.
Too often it's an immediate knee-jerk reaction, right? And yet if we'll pause and maybe even count to 1, 2, 3 before we say something,
right,
we're usually going to say something better,
right,
wise, more mature,
right,
inclusive. It's a really good principle to remember.
Yeah. Well, and another point to that, which I won't go into, but I didn't have a personal experience. I was helping someone else with the experience. But if you really look at it, we're really only what we acknowledge, right? And what I mean by that is, you know, if someone calls you out of name or out of, you know, whatever they may do that makes you upset, the first thing people have to realize is first you have to acknowledge it, right? So to me, if you acknowledge it, you're saying you are those things. So my deflective is I'm not going to acknowledge when I'm not. So there's no reason for me to get angry because what you're saying, that's not who I am. So obviously you don't know me. 2, you're not talking to me because I'm not that.
Right. That's interesting. You know, it's as much as we hate it, you know, when we've gotten the silent treatment from from a spouse or a child or something, it is so disconcerting because they're not acknowledging us. And right. it's a little bit of a parallel there where until we acknowledge it,
right,
until we accept what they're saying, until we confirm it,
right,
it really isn't true. Right? It doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. And if we react to it, we're giving it more credence. My parents always say is that what someone says about you says more about them than it does about you.
Right.
So I've always remembered that principle. But we're coming up on a break here. We'll do a couple of breaks during the show here, but I'd love to come back and hear a little bit more about your upbringing and you know you talk about your big family dinners every weekend and stuff like that, and I'm sure that's contributed to who you are. Your family, as all of us are bringing contributes, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that when we come back from break. So we're speaking with Gary Reeves here, producer. He's an entertainment mogul, music executive. The list goes on. I don't know if we take up the whole show if we listed all your accolades, Gary, but we really appreciate you being here. I'm enjoying the conversation so far. We will be back, folks. Be right back with you. So hang tight. And thanks for being with us here on Finding Certainty.
Okay, good job, guys. All clear. Back in 2.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So I record the YouTube video and I always post it with the chit chat between the breaks. So just know we're still recording, and some people like watching and seeing the behind the scenes. So yeah, we kind of jumped right into the conversation there. I was hoping to give you a little more chance to talk about your upbringing and stuff, but that's all right. We'll get into it here, and I'd love to talk to you more about the Give series.
Okay.
What you're doing there is really extraordinary. just love to hear your experience, how it came about. And I know working within entertainment, I think you have this responsibility to put out good content. And
Correct.
unfortunately, there's far more out there than too much that isn't as uplifting and as positive and just as inspiring as it could be. But interested to hear more of your story about working with Blair Underwood and totally, if you don't mind sharing.
No, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I normally, I'll say a person of influence. I really don't. Then it's kind of like you're in a weird box because you don't want to name drop, but that's kind of the world you're living in, right? So I always was very conscious about it's a person of influence or whatever. But some now people call out a certain. I get it from a TV value or interview value standpoint. Michael Jordan means something. Magic, all these people mean something. So I've gotten more comfortable, but yeah, no, I mean, Blair is like a brother to me, and all these guys, a lot of them I've known them before they were who they were, but always in a place of gratitude because they could really pick anybody to work with, right? And so I always have that as a level of consciousness, and then how can we take that influence and uplift people, right, and give other people a voice that normally wouldn't have a voice.
Sorry to jump in, but we are coming back.
All right, thanks, Matt.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Lang. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Thanks for listening, everybody. You're on Finding Certainty, and we're interviewing Gary Reeves, who has a long history of work in the music industry and television. He has a significant story, if you will, of social impact, the ways in which he's giving back, ways in which he's inspiring others to give back. And I know, Gary, that's really your soft spot, if you will, right? That's the part of your career which I know you're most proud of.
Right.
We jumped into an interesting discussion before about some of the differences between how people think and reaction versus response and so forth. But I assume that much of that outlook and much of who you are has come from your upbringing. You grew up in, is it Berkeley that you grew up in? And
Berkeley, Bay Area. But El Cerrito and Berkeley is probably a majority of my footprint of how I was raised. And
you have a lot of family in the area, right? I know growing up, you said you'd get together for these big family dinners. And
every Saturday for my entire childhood, actually, we used to get together at my great grandmother's house. So it was kind of like 20 to 30 family members every Saturday, and I spent most of my weekends there with my grandparents, which were like 4 blocks from each other. My great grandparents and my grandparents were 4 blocks from each other. So no, we had a very closely knit family, and actually, I always say that my grandmother, great grandmother, my mom were heavily influenced my life on reference to what they call soft skills,
right.
And so I got my soft skills there, and really the respect for, or comfortability, I should say, around women leadership, because I was exposed to women leading my life, right? And my dad was a pharmacist, and he broke a lot of glass ceilings and the things that he accomplished, and he and I were very close as well. And he was a big influence in my life. My grandfather was a big influence in my life. I used to cut lawns with him every Saturday before I went to play Little League Baseball. So I kind of credit him with my work ethic. So I used to score keep because I was good in math, cut lawns for my grandfather. And then my grandmother had a dear friend who owned a nursery, and so she used to let me water all the plants before she opened up the nursery. So I had 3 jobs.
Nice.
From 13 to about 17, you know, in that kind of in those 3 buckets. And you know, so, you know, going back to what your question was, I would say a lot of that molded me for sure. What's interesting though, and I reflect back on it, like I'm not a drinker, no, never done drugs or anything of that nature. Um, you know, wasn't until I was 40 somewhere I tasted wine, just because of we got Napa Valley, and I was doing some things in the business of the wine industry where we celebrate people through wine, right?
Right.
And but they were heavy drinkers, you know, longshoremen, which are, you know, kind of like blue collar doctors is what they used to say. You know, heavy drinking, heavy smoking, cigars, cigarettes, and I just never was intrigued by that, which was, and I saw that every Saturday, right? And a lot of the men that I looked up to in my family were all longshoremen. So it's interesting how I was exposed to that my entire childhood, and really never stepped into that box. So
Right.
it's kind of, you know, when you look at, you know, how kids are cultivated and you say where your influences are, that's one that's always stuck out to me, where I was surrounded by, you know, my dad drank wine every day. He came home from the pharmacy and had a cigarette. He ended up quitting smoking, but I just never, it never intrigued me. It wasn't anything where I was curious, or, you know, so that's kind of interesting to me to this day, like how did that happen? But, you know, a lot of it, like I said earlier, is I was just a curious kid that um, I didn't just jump into something. You know, I was not challenging it from a negative standpoint, but just, you know, like, what's the buy-in, right? What's the silver lining? Why people are buying into this? It's kind of always where I've always sat, you know, in that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we gain things from our families and from our upbringings, our mentors, and a lot of the time it's we learn what we don't want to do, right? What we don't want to become.
Right.
In
And
skills and strengths, we gain the opposite. I mean, I grew up in a
yeah,
family where they franchised a business all over the country, and it took a lot of time and kind of consumed our family. And
yeah,
I grew up with the concept that I liked the idea of being an entrepreneur, but I wanted to do some things differently. I wanted to keep more balance in my life and keep make sure I didn't have a business that was so complicated that I couldn't unplug from it. And so
right.
I can
Yeah,
resonate with what you're saying.
yeah, you know, and but you know, all in all, yeah, even, you know, the block that I grew up on, you know, it's 18 kids. We were all like brothers and sisters. My dad separated from my mom when I was 11, so I was the only household that didn't have mom and dad in the house. But I never felt like I was at a disadvantage. I never felt like I was an outcast. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, looking back, I mean, I was just living life, but looking back on all of these things that normally would maybe disturb a young kid, not feeling like, you know, they're not completed, right? Or they don't have a social, emotional upbringing that was completed. But, you know, and that's why I really take a lot of time and speak to, I work a lot with foster youth and just different kids that have what society wouldn't call normal circumstances,
Mhm.
and really share with them that you create your own norm, really. You know, there is no, someone else's norm is not your norm, right?
Right.
The silver lining in it though is be kind, be loving. um you know, always say, you know, if you can forgive without judgment. You know, forgiving is one thing. People say, well, I'll forgive but I won't forget. You know, so how do you forgive without judgment, right? And grow from the lesson, and keep moving forward, because everything is a lesson, whether you're proud of it or not. You're smarter in the moment than you were before, right?
Mhm.
So, and those are just basic things that I think everyone understands it, but it's kind of how do you slow down and practice it, right?
Absolutely. Well,
I think it's important.
growing up with a matriarch heavy family, right? Your mother, your grandmother, and you said they were very influential in your life. I think that's a huge advantage, actually, because, and I agree with you that children growing up, they need to understand that they can make their own future. They can make their own outcome. They're not, too often we fall into these victim patterns where we feel like it's someone else's job, or I'm confused, or
Yeah.
and we really we run into this we create our own roadblocks, right? We make it harder than it has to,
Right.
in my opinion. One of my favorite books I've ever read is a book called The Oz Principle, and it tells the story of the characters from The Wizard of Oz. They're going down the yellow brick road to find the wizard who's supposed to fix their problems.
Right.
In the end, they come to find, I highly recommend this book, but they come to find that they had it within them all along.
Right.
The scarecrow figures out several puzzles. He obviously has a brain. The lion shows courage. The Tin Man is so emotional. He rusts himself a couple of times.
Right.
He obviously has a heart. And then Dorothy realizes at the end of the story that she's been wearing the slippers that could have taken her home the entire time.
Right.
We also find that the wizard was a shyster. He couldn't help them anyway. He was all smoke and mirrors. And so it's a really interesting analogy of accountability. One of the most important questions they ask in the book is they say, keep asking, what else can I do? And when you ask for help, it doesn't mean you're being a victim. If anything, it's empowering to admit that you need help, to reach out and ask for someone to mentor you, to guide you.
Right.
Really, really interesting story. I've always appreciated it. In fact, I have a book that just came out this last week on Amazon, and I wrote a chapter in it about this topic, about accountability.
Right.
It's something that if you can understand it, it can absolutely transform your life.
Yeah. And and the other part of it, kind of leaning in on the Michael Jordan story and relationship. When I approached Michael, it wasn't about Michael Jordan, the great basketball player. It was the fact that he got cut in the 10th grade.
Right.
And at that time, nobody knew that story. And I felt that was an important story to tell. Because if he would have stopped playing based on this person that he respected, opinion of his ability, or just out of any kind of discouragement from the person that he respected, we wouldn't know Michael Jordan as we knew him today. And so it wasn't really about sports. It's about, if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to own your own business, whatever it is you want to be, and you have someone of authority that you respect, say, well, I don't think that's right for you. I don't think you should do that. And then you just quit, right? And there's a lot of that because that's how we're dialed up, especially when we respect the person. So, I felt that was an important narrative to share because, we definitely want opinions and insights from people we respect. But at the end of the day, no one can measure your passion for it. Even with my own dad, in reference to, I knew I wanted to be of service, but it wasn't sexy. It wasn't something like, okay, how are you going to take care of yourself? And I just had a level of faith that I will find that place where it'll all line up and I will be able to take care of my needs, not so much my wants, because that's another thing, right? Needs and wants.
Right.
And, and it morphed into, to where I am today, where I feel like I've lived a very rich life of experiences. And then where I've been able to bridge some of those experiences to inspire other people and uplift them and help them be celebrated as well. And that's where, like going back earlier, that's my passion is, I'm not afraid to celebrate other people, because at the end of the day, it all comes back and contributes to us because we're all elevated by someone else's greatness, right? We're more efficient now because of, the Facebooks of the world or the Amazons of the world. People are more efficient around the things that are their own dreams. But now, how many more entrepreneurs now can pursue being an entrepreneur because of Amazon? I mean, I don't even know what that number is. But, so you start looking at, celebrating other people's excellence. If it's done with the right intentions, it opens up doors for your own dreams to be realized or kind of manifest other, things that you're more, that you're proud of, or um, um,
That you want to contribute,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. The interesting thing is, I know with your career and by giving service, you talk about if you focus on serving others, you focus on giving back, everything else kind of takes care of itself. It comes back
right,
to you a thousandfold.
right,
We've experienced that with our business, Certainty Management, where we are a cost reduction firm who
right,
made the decision to use what we're good at to help nonprofits raise free funding. So we work with nonprofits and say, we can help you raise unlimited zero cost funding. We charge them nothing for it. But when we made that pivot from profit to purpose,
yeah,
everything changed. We started opening up doors and windows. I mean, I've got Gary Reeves on my show today. It's like God or the universe or whoever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, reached down and said, "You're doing good. I'm going to give you a hand." And we've met extraordinary people. We've opened up these relationships we didn't even imagine. Our business has just exploded. It all happened when we realized we could do more than make income. We can make a difference.
right,
So, if I may, I have a question for you. You talk about soft skills, and I know you grew up as an athlete, played
yeah.
4 different sports, but grew up with some strong matriarchs in your family. How does a man today develop those soft skills while also being a producer, a breadwinner, a leader? There's all these strong principles, these strong characters and concepts and mindsets that are driven into our brain. And a lot of men, especially even women, don't realize how important soft skills are.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back. It's biblical and practical, because at the end of the day, its soft skills are, like I said. How do you see the we in me, right? Um, how to, just being kind, being a listener,
Right? People skills.
right? And then giving people credit where they deserve credit, and acknowledgments where they deserve acknowledgments. So that goes into the gender equalities in the workspace. I mean, just across the board, right?
Right.
Um, your male counterpart or whoever that is excelling, and acknowledging that doesn't take anything away from you. That's their gift. Um, but I would say listening and having, seeing the we in me. That's the key, I think, today, in reference to how we can really dial back, slow down, and look at how we treat others as how we feel about us. If we're not treating people well, we just need to self-evaluate, right? We need to say, like, what's the chip on our shoulder that I can't be kind to this person, or I can't listen to this person. um, and I think it helps if we have more conversations, right? And I think, you
Right.
know you've been a blessing to allow me to be, on your show. And I don't for years I didn't really do any interviews or anything, because I was behind other, more significant. I don't want to say more significant people, but more celebrated, culturally celebrated personalities. And I was fine in that space. And people used to say, well, your story needs to be out there. It's not really my story. I get what people are saying, but at the end of the day, we just need to be kind. We need to make our contributions more to inspire others that, hey, you know it's okay to be this way, to be kind, to be loving. People are not perfect. That's another thing. We're a culture that pushes perfection, and none of us will be perfect. We can't. The beauty of life is correction, really. you know
Yes. Improvement.
yeah,
We're up against another break here, but I love this conversation because it's so true to success in life, to satisfaction in life, to connection. When you can edify others, when you can try to be patient with each other. And remember, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one's perfect.
Right.
And together, if we can take everyone with a grain of salt, seek to get to know each other, seek to communicate more, have more conversations, I mean, extraordinary things can happen.
Yeah.
And you really don't understand that, I think, until you make that effort and you start to experience it. Like that movie, Best of Enemies I talked about. It's we have this paradigm shift and this epiphany that if we have not experienced that, we should seek it in our lives because it can change everything. So anyway, we're going to go to break, but we're speaking with Gary Reeves, icon in the industry. And we'll be back here shortly, folks. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll continue the conversation.
All right, perfect. Good job, guys. Back in 2.
All right. Thanks, Matt. When I was first invited to be a host, Gary, I was on Frank's show, who Frank Hellring, and he invited me to meet with Robert Cellino about being a host for Voice America. And the first question I said to Robert, or I asked Robert, I said, "So I don't have to be Frank Hellring, do I?" I said, "I love Frank, but." But I said, he's so animated and outspoken and political and, in your face. And I just said, I said, that's not my personality. So I hope you'll appreciate my style. I'm more soft-spoken and laid back. You and I think, have similar personalities in ways, but we might put somebody to sleep if they listen to us too long, but we,
right.
In short snippets, it works. No, I'm just kidding. But I just spent the whole week in Virginia with Frank. He was out there with us, and we spoke at this big CEO summit at Lynchburg, Virginia. And getting to spend 5 days straight with Frank was a joy. He is such an amazing guy, and he's so animated and so opinionated and so passionate.
Right. Yeah.
It was really fun. But we are very different. So my coaster keeps sticking to the bottom of my cup.
All right, coming back here in about 12 seconds.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Lang. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Thanks for coming back, everybody. We always appreciate it when you continue to listen. And we're having a great conversation with myself and Gary Reeves here. If you've been listening, we're talking about the power of kindness, of love, of conversations in business and in life. And, Gary, I know you're a very humble person. You're not one to talk about your own accomplishments. And that's hard because every host wants to talk about the celebrities you've worked with and the experiences you've had. And it's really a pretty impressive lineup. But as you look back on your career, and maybe I could ask you, is there one person that you've worked with that had an impact on you? And maybe let's address maybe one person from history who has had an impact on you. I know you have some favorites, but do you mind sharing just your insights on those two individuals that have played a role in your life?
Celebrity or just in general?
In general, whoever comes to mind.
I would say, just, obviously it's family. My mother was probably my biggest cheerleader. Actually my mother, my great grandmother, and my grandma were my, but let me credit my mom because, she just instilled not only the love in me, but also that anything was possible. She never an idea that I had or something I was going to pursue. Um, she was always the person you can do it. And there were challenges. Being a point guard at my size at that time, I love basketball, but I also knew if you love something, it helps you push through. And so even when I talk to kids today, I always say, you socialize something, you like something, and you love it, right? All three are fine.
Right.
And the one that loves it is going to push through, right? So, and that's really applicable in most things, relationships, socialize with a person, like them, love them, and so those three kind of pointers I've always looked at and always tried to share with kids. All three are fine, but understand that when you love something, that's where the shine is going to happen.
Right. I'd love to hear more about your mentors, but that actually brings to mind something. When we were in Virginia this last week, Frank Hellring, Ken York, Tony Singh, Mike Peluso, and our whole team was back there speaking at this CEO summit. And, we had this, and I talk a lot about how my favorite part of what we're doing now is the zero cost fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
We had this extraordinary insight come to us. I think was almost given to us, that we could use what we're good at to help nonprofits raise, not only help nonprofits raise funding, but we could help college students to graduate debt free.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have seen, and you should have seen their eyes light up, these kids we were talking to, right? Because every college student goes through their experience with this kind of black cloud hanging over there.
Right.
It almost taints their college experience, right? Because they have the worry of debt hanging over their head, and they have the concern that they're not going to find a job when they get out of school, right?
Right.
And so talking about doing what we love, we have just literally in the last week started to evolve a program. I think we're going to call it the Certainty Freedom Fellowship, and help these kids to find their passion, teach them business skills, and actually help them through what we do to earn income while they're in college, so that they can graduate debt-free and with money in the bank to start their own business, to build a house, to transition to their career. And I am so excited about this idea, Gary. We need to talk about it more offline, but speaking of doing things you love, I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. But so talk about a mentor from history, if you wouldn't mind, that's impacted you. I know you have some favorites.
Yeah. I mean, I would call out, so Urban, I mean, I don't really go deep into my relationship with Magic, but I would say he exposed me to a world at a young age. I mean, I was 14 maybe. So, when he came to the Lakers, he was 19. And I started spending the summers with him. A family member of mine used to do a big high school basketball tournament in the Bay Area, which brought him into the Bay Area to play. It was him, Albert King, and Sam Clancy, and Gene Banks were the high school seniors that were brought in from out of town that played against all the local stars. Nice. And so that was my first encounter with Urban at that point. And then when he came to the Lakers, he came back the next year as a freshman from Michigan State to watch the tournament again. But my relationship started with him when he became a rookie with the Lakers, and so I used to go out and attend his camp as a kid, and then later started to stay over after camp. And so that experience, I mean, had to be amazing, from the standpoint of exposure, right? As a young kid, not so much, I never really was idolized Urban, but the exposure, seeing the world through his lens, because I was, in certain situations I was around him, probably was definitely one of the things that was life changing. And, and then, eventually went on to work for him which I love him for just that belief um, in giving me that opportunity. And you can only imagine it was kind of, like a big brother.
Almost ethereal, right?
Well, yeah, and then it's kind of like a big brother little brother relationship where
Right.
you don't grow into manhood when you have that kind of history, really. So, um, and that happens. But I would say that was very impactful. Mr. Adams, who brought me in at 19 to work for the Golden State Warriors, along with Purvis Short and Reverend Hirschfield. Again, those I put them in all three.
Mm-hmm.
Was a life changer. At 19, I'm in the locker room speaking to players, around the importance of spirituality and how that applies to, when you go out on the field. But it was spiritual based, religious based, but it's more practical about, understand the gift that you're earning money playing basketball, right? A game that you loved, but then where that being in that position, what you can do with that, so I did a lot of things around with foster youth with the team, from cookouts with foster kids to kids being able to come to a practice and meet the players, and just all kind of unique experiences, having access to the guys and the guys participating. But, it was Mr. Adams who introduced me to the team chaplain, to then meeting Purvis Short, who, I would say that really kind of changed my life at 19. I'm, working in the locker rooms of the NBA for close to 13 years. Yeah.
We're winding down here toward the end, but would you mind sharing just a minute on the Give series? I know it's such a great a project and enterprise. I mean, I'm sure working with Oprah is amazing. And you mind just commenting on that? We've got about
Give kind of came out of my relationship with Blair Underwood, which is we're going on 30 years maybe together in the working relationship, and just him being a brother, another person that I highly respect because he trusted me, right? And so he was heavily being requested for speaking engagements, personal appearances, donations, and things of that nature. And so Give kind of came out of that. How do I help him address all of the requests? And so the show, which is hosted by him and Jenna Bush for 3 seasons, and as you said, we won a number of accolades around it. But it wasn't easy because it was a show about celebrating nonprofits and people of service. There was no drama. There was no wine glasses being thrown. There was no foul language. It was just, hey, here are some people that are not being properly, I shouldn't say not properly, but people that are trust agents in local communities that don't have the support to, for grants and things of that nature. So we've been able to address over 100 nonprofits to date. And Blair, is the face of that. And we're continuing to build out. And like I said, because of the category, it's not easy. We started on NBC. We were fortunate to move over to OWN, and now we're going to kind of expand out on that brand. And then we have a lot of other, some new shows in the same box with Jamie Foxx and some other people around, social impact and how to amplify people that are real trust agents.
I love that word, trust agents. It's so important. And I'm very excited for what you guys are doing, Gary. Congratulations. And I know you're not looking for a recognition or anything, but it's inspiring to see people who care and people who are trying to make a difference. So if someone wanted to reach out and support you in any of your endeavors, is there a website or something we'd send them to? Or
we have the Give to Change Foundation website, which really shows you the body of work that we've done. That would probably be a good start. And then email. I don't know if I want to put my email.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that would be a great starter, and whatever support people want to give, it's definitely welcomed.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to lots more conversations with you, my friend. Thanks for being on today. Our show is all about finding certainty. And in my opinion, you've spent a lifetime helping create more certainty in others' lives. And that is a tribute to you, my friend. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. And hopefully we've inspired some people to, jump into action, right?
I hope we have. Don't sit and wait, guys. Keep asking, what else can I do? You'll be amazed at what a difference you can make, even in your own small way. Small ways become medium-sized waves. They become even bigger ways. It's we're experiencing it, and it's almost overwhelming seeing how the multiplier effect happens. So, thanks again, Gary. Next week, come visit us with our guest is Mr. Ken York. He's the CEO of a company called Life Exec, who's providing benefits to small businesses and the 50 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. They cannot afford the coverage that's available to them. Ken and his company have a solution. So if you have any questions, text the word certainty to 26786. We'll let you go, but I hope to see you next week. Thanks again, Gary. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome show, guys. Good job today. All clear.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was painful, right, Gary? I know you just love these kinds of interviews because you just love the limelight, but you are a trooper and a hero to me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for allowing me to be on the show. And we'll follow up, sure.
Yeah, it wasn't painful for me. It was a pleasure, but I know you, I know how much you've, yeah, I saw an interview with you on the Impact guys, and you were talking about how, I think they were highlighting your 100th episode of, it was on Martin Luther King Day, actually.
Right.
I remember your heroes, and it was a great interview. I mean, I'm going to listen to more of his. I could learn a lot from him. I'm a fairly new host, so I'm still kind of getting my feet under me, but I appreciated your comment on how you had to get used to doing these interviews because it wasn't comfortable for you. Maybe it's probably still not comfortable. And I'm a people person, but I joke with people that I'm a antisocial people person.
Right.
I have skills, I think, where it comes easy to me, but I just as soon be in a room working on my computer by myself or fishing on a river all by myself. I'm not a crowd person, right? I'm fine one-on-one, but I don't really enjoy the chaos of the crowd. And so being in this role, it's a little bit of a stretch for me to be thrust into a forced people person role. But I'm really enjoying it. We've had some fantastic guests. You should go back and listen to some of the other episodes if you like. As soon as we get yours posted, it'll go live later today, and I'll send you the link. They're gonna add your bio and whatnot in there. But I look forward to speaking with you more about maybe some ways we could help you in some of your organizations. We have some really kind of out of the box approaches to help nonprofits raise funding that they don't have to, it doesn't cost them anything. They don't have to sell anything. They don't have to ask for donations. And, and it's refreshing. That's the main reason we were asked to come speak at Liberty is because of what we're doing. And now there's this whole new kind of offshoot that's happening where we realized we could not just help nonprofits raise funding, but we could help college students get out of school debt free.
That's great. Yeah, I have definitely some two organizations in mind or around that for sure. That I think there's some silver lining for what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about it. We'd love to help if we can. And let's I'll shoot you my calendar link. Let's book another time. We can talk more about it.
Yeah, sure.
But thanks again. Appreciate you getting on early this morning and spending some time with me.
No, thank you.
All right. Take care of yourself. You're in a gorgeous part of the country there in Berkeley.
Thank you. And you as well.
Looks like a nice day outside too. So I'll talk to you later, Gary. Thanks so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
We'll
Talk
see you.
soon. All right. Bye-bye.